Greetings! It is I, Tentus Nara Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my review of anime series, and then letting you know some suggestions on how you can use them in your big eyes, small mouth games, your BESM games. Again, as I always say, you can always adapt these to other role-playing game systems. These suggestions on the base level help you to establish the world there. The game systems might have to adapt for yourself. Now, I have, of course, two more from this season. Shuumatsu, Nani, Shitemasu Ka, and of course, Clockwork Planet. I have a suggestion from you, Love Hina, and I have one going back in time, Gugure Kokkurisan. But let's start, of course, with Shuumatsu, Nani, Shite, Matsuka, or World End. What are you doing at the end of the world? Are you busy? Will you save us? Alright, so 500 years ago, humanity went extinct when mysterious creatures called beasts destroyed the surface. The remaining races upon the world basically fled to the sky in giant floating islands, where the beasts themselves cannot reach. Now, we focus on, of course, these young girls called leprechauns, who are spirit-type folk who can use these ancient human-based weapons called dug weapons, because only humans could have used them, and they can use them to fight against the beasts themselves. Because the beasts, though they can't directly attack it, they can do things to attempt to influence and move their way into the sky items, and it's up to the leprechauns to fight against them and keep them back. We focus on a young man who lost everything 500 years ago, but got sealed away, slept for all that time, and now is woken up in this world today. And he gets in charge of these leprechauns. And he then basically looks after them, becomes a father figure, becomes family to them, as he tries to reconcile for his own past in this new world, and the terrible future that they have for themselves, battling against these creatures. Now, it's a sci-fi. It's technically set deeper into the future, and you can see there is a level of technology that exists here that makes it feel very sci-fi. It's also a fantasy, because you have special powers, almost magic to it, that these dug weapons are technically built out of powerful magics constructed together. It's also a drama, because there's this deep, unseated problems that are going to occur with the society as it is, that these leprechauns are basically being sent to their death, and they're technically children. They might be a little older when they're actually sent to their deaths, but they are. And the darkness that is their actual origins exists there too, the real reason that these leprechauns exist and what they are. Now, I rate this one a 5. I didn't expect to like this one as much as I did, but I liked it a lot, as I have so far. Now, granted, it's not quite done yet. It's pretty close to the end of the season, but man, this one actually caught me off guard that I liked it as much as I did. Now, if you're using this as a BESM game, I'd recommend 400 points. You want to make your characters a group of leprechauns. So, of course, they're all going to be female characters. And effectively what they're going to be doing is they're going to be using dug weapons to fight against the beasts and keep the island safe, to both effectively continue to work towards basically even saving the world, maybe ridding the ground of the beasts, and eventually then saving all of humanity, and dealing with the fact that they are in fact reincarnations of dead spirits, of dead probably human spirits, that they have to deal with the fact that their past lives seep into them eventually, and they have to deal with that curse of their past lives, while dealing with the fact that they might have to give their lives to fight against these beasts, and they might not want to die in a way. So they have to try to balance their living and deaths to continue their greatness. Let's move on, though, and talk about Clockwork Planet. So at a certain point in time, the Earth was basically falling apart, going to be destroyed. It was dying. A mysterious, powerful engineer known as Y decided to save the world. He effectively made a clockwork version of the world. A massive place with gears, where now people live upon these gears in various cities. 1,000 years have gone by on this clockwork world. And now we focus on, of course, a young boy named Naoto, who has exceptional hearing, far beyond a normal person's. And a coffin clap falls into his roof of his house. He opens it and finds an automation there that he manages to repair that turns out to be one of the original automations built by Y to help protect the planet. Along the way, though, he meets Marie, a gifted young engineer, one of the greatest master gearsmiths, basically clockwork masters, on the planet up until now. A very young age, who, combined with her, then goes and helps to defeat some of the problems that exist within the society as it is. Problems within the society, threats to the very world itself, that the two of them join forces, along, of course, with the progenitor automation on Naoto's side, who he basically kind of is a little nutty about, and then they go off and try to basically save the Clockwork Planet. So, of course, in action, there is this definite level of action in battling it out, fighting against the forces that are trying to basically either be corrupt or destabilize the world. It's clockpunk. It's a very unique thing because it's very much a clockwork idea to it, and it's like a version of steampunk kind of thing, but it's basically around clocks, so that's why it's clockpunk. It also has a level of fantasy to it that both of the two original progenitor automations they find have unique and fantastical powers based upon a single gear that almost seem fantasy-like. I rate this one a 4. It's a pretty interesting series. It has some great stuff to it, and it did draw me in pretty well, but it does have a little bit of ridiculous to it enough that does, sometimes not keeps it from being a 5. Keeps it from being perfect in my eye. Now, if you're using this as a BESM game, I would recommend 200 points. You're either going to make your characters be effectively mechanical experts, either a figure more like Marie or Naoto with different skills that make them great clockwork workers. Then you will also, or you can make your players basically the cyborg clockwork people, because we found out that there are in fact clockwork cyborgs. Yes, just there's clockwork robots, there's clockwork cyborgs, you can make a character clockwork cyborg too. Regardless of what they do, they're going to be teaming up in order to basically protect the world, remove some of the corruption that is, deal with problems that are occurring either in various cities, various places, maybe even globally to a degree. Traditionally, it's more city-sized, something terrible's happening in a city, you have to deal with it, and they're taking themselves outside the normal rules, laws, and kind of things in order to save this world as a team. And if you want, you could put some of the original automation series with them as NPCs to help supplement some of their abilities, especially depending on how grandiose you want it to be. Basically, they'll deal with some of the military, which is hard to explain away dealing with, while your engineer people will be dealing with the problem at hand, and, maybe you'd have your cyborg people protecting them directly from any threats that get close to them while the big-time automations take care of most of the things. So it keeps it that you still focus on your main group, while you could still have these very powerful NPCs with them. It's very easy to do that with the way that you can set things up here, if you wanted to. Now let's move on to the one that we're going back in time with Gugure Kokkurisan. Kokkina is a young, eccentric elementary school girl who only eats noodles and believes herself to be a doll. She is very strange, and very eccentric, and she lives alone. The fact is, one day she accidentally summons this spirit fox, Kokkuri-san. Now, Kokkuri-san has his own way of doing things, being a supernatural being, but seeing this young girl and her situation, decides to look after her and raise her to be a right person, because she treats herself like a doll, only eats instant noodles. She's not really in good shape for being part of society. So Kokkuri-san begins to look after her, and so begins her life with supernatural beings as more supernatural creatures come into her purview. Some begin to live with her, others just live around her. She has to deal with those while kind of developing into a normal person a little bit along the way. So, of course, it's a comedy series. They're all really eccentric characters, all the supernatural beings. Kokkina-san herself is incredibly eccentric. It's also supernatural. We have fox spirits, other various types of spirits, Tengu, Tanuki, they're all around there, so there's lots of supernatural creatures that seem to focus around Kokkina. And of course, it's a slice of life. We deal with her normal everyday life. Going to school as an elementary school student, living at home with Kokkuri-san and the others, living with all this stuff, and trying to have a basically normal life, as eccentric as she is and as strange as supernatural creatures basically looking after her is. Tries to be it. Now, I rated this one a 4. It's actually pretty goddamn it was pretty entertaining when I watched it at the time, and I still would recommend checking it out. It's a pretty good one. Definitely worth a watch. Now, if you're using this BESM game, I recommend 300 points. You're going to make your group a group of supernatural creatures that's going to be looking after a child. The child is probably going to be eccentric, weird, have problems, be living on their own, kind of like your own version of Kokkina. And your players are effectively then going to be looking after it, trying to make it a model version of society, trying to make it live a normal life to a degree, even though you're a bunch of supernatural creatures. That's going to butt heads with each other, of course, because you're going to have problems with each other, deal with other supernatural creatures, deal with everyday life for this little girl, and yourselves in a way, too, and try to balance everything out in a reasonable manner that nothing quite breaks. Now let's move on to the last one, which is your suggestion, Love Hina. So the story of Love Hina focuses on Kentaro. Kentaro is effectively this student who, at a young age, made some kind of promise with a girl that they would both meet each other again in Tokyo University. He has failed the exams to Tokyo University twice now. While he thinks that he's going to still meet this girl when he gets there, that his life is going to turn around, so he continually still tries to get in. His parents kind of get fed up with him and kick him out. They don't leave him out for dry, though. They say he can go his grandmother says he can look after the hotel she runs. But when he gets there, it turns out that the hotel has been converted to a woman's dorm. Well, so he runs into with the people living there, has some problems, but it turns out his grandmother has effectively left him in charge of the place. He effectively is the manager, the owner, the person in charge of it. He's there to stay. So now he has to balance out his life as the manager of all these girls, has to still study to get into Tokyo University, and tries to make his life, in this situation where he's run into some problems. Now, this one, of course, is a harem. He gets sort of into relationships with a bunch of the different girls there. Some of them remind him of girls he knew from his past, but he can't quite remember them, and one of them might be, one of them might not be, etc., etc. Other girls he sort of has relationships with. It's a comedy, that's for sure. There's lots of funny things happening. Kentaro's kind of an idiot to a degree, idiot savant. He does stupid things, he gets into accidents, he falls around, he's clumsy. And it's a little bit of a slice of life, as he's trying to make his way in life, deal with situations at the apartments, at the dorms, deal with new people coming in, deal with the people that are there and their problems, while still balancing out studying and trying to make a life for himself. Now, I do rate this one a 3 personally. Now, I didn't have as much problem as I know some people really do with this series. This series is a hotbed of contention, a lot of people. I didn't watch as much of the anime. I read through the entire manga series. Let me tell you that. I did actually read through the entire manga. I did find the manga pretty decent, and that's why I'm rating it a 3. But again, I can see where people note, because Kentaro can be so infuriating at times, and I can see that. That's why, I don't rate it higher, because I can see the problems that some people have with this series. I recognize you people out there that dislike it. I understand why you do. I don't necessarily agree that it's so bad, but I do agree that it's not perfect in my eyes. So I'm not at either end of this spectrum. That's why I'm kind of putting it in the mid-range of my enjoyments. Now, if you're using this BESM game, I recommend 150 points. You're going to make this pretty simple. You're going to make it a bunch of people living in an apartment. Now, this apartment should be exactly like the apartment they have there, i.e. it should be a woman's only apartment. Now, you could, if you really wanted to, switch things around and make it a men's only apartment, but you're either going to have an NPC of the opposite sex jump in there, or if you really wanted to be a little bold, you can make it a PC. You could have one of your players be either, if you're doing the woman's only, the male character moving in, or if you want to go for that craziness and making it a men's only and making it the woman that's moving in, and then just have crazy relationships and crazy things occur between them. Have kind of funny, silly things. Each character should have their own eccentricities that they're bringing to the plate. All of them are trying to survive, and you're going to have a little bit of their normal lives, each with their own goals, why they're there at the apartments to the first place. You'll probably have a couple of NPCs also thrown in there for the mix. You'll have to deal with problems at the apartment, visitors, events that are going on that are big events that they're all going to get involved with. And so all of this combined is going to be the adventures that you're going to have at the apartments. Kind of making it definitely in the feel of the Love Hina, and the fact is it has the setup for a harem. The amount of romance or comedy and the balance between them is entirely going to be up to you as the GM and how you can establish it. You should definitely have your characters each make their own eccentricities to their characters, their players to their characters, just to make sure you can have that comedy in there. And the possibility of past relationships between some of the players is entirely up to them, but I would recommend you try to get a couple of them to do that. How that relationship deals out and how it's dealt out, up to you. But at least one or two of them have some connections together. But that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more anime series, reviewing them, and gave you some suggestions on how you can use them in your BESM games. Now, as I said at the beginning, you can easily adapt these to other role-playing game systems. You will have to work on the rules, character creation, basically what they're going to be rolling, but the setup, the setting itself, pertains well to plenty of other game systems. Pretty easy in some of them, much more difficult in others, but if you have a particular favorite system that you think it would work well in, go ahead and use it. The ones that you think it works well in, oftentimes it can easier to adapt to it. That's the thing, is you have to feel out which one it adapts to better than others, but you can really use any. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. There's some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.